year was 2024, and it was supposed to be a perfect holiday for us Friedrich, Jacob, Mark, and Joe. After months of busy schedules, we had finally managed to plan a trip together, far away from the chaos of the city. The mountains called to us, and with high spirits, we left home in Jacob's dad's car, ready for the adventure of a lifetime. The journey itself was exciting, with music lasting in the car, snacks scattered around, and laughter filling the air. After a long, exhausting 10-hour drive, we finally arrived at our destination. The fresh mountain air greeted us as we checked into a charming little hotel. It had an old-world vibe, with wooden interiors and a cozy fireplace in the lobby. We had booked 2 rooms. Mark and I shared one, while Jacob and Joe bunked together in the other. That first evening, after freshening up, we explored the hotel and its beautiful garden. Dinner was a hearty affair at a nearby restaurant, followed by a leisurely stroll under the starry sky. That night passed peacefully, with no hint of the horrors that awaited us. The next morning, we woke up early, eager to explore. The mountains were breathtaking, with dense forests and serene trails stretching as far as the eye could see. We wandered for hours, marveling at the beauty around us. It was during one of these hikes that Jacob suggested camping. The idea lit a spark in all of us. Camping in the wild sounded thrilling, adventurous, and something we'd never done before. Without hesitation, we headed to the local market to buy supplies: tents, sleeping bags, a portable stove, and enough food to last the night. The campsite we chose was deep in the forest, surrounded by towering trees and eerie silence. It was secluded and peaceful, or so we thought. We reached the spot in the late afternoon, just as the sunlight began to filter through the canopy in golden streaks. Setting up the tents was an adventure in itself, filled with clumsy attempts and bursts of laughter. Jacob, ever the energetic one, took charge of the bonfire. Soon, we had a roaring fire going, and the aroma of food began to fill the air. As darkness fell, the forest transformed. The cheerful chirping of birds gave way to an unsettling stillness. It wasn't just quiet, it was too quiet. Even the usual rustle of leaves seemed to have disappeared, replaced by an oppressive silence. We sat around the fire, talking and joking, trying to shake off the unease that was slowly creeping in. Jacob, ever the thrill-seeker, suggested venturing out to explore the forest at night. "Come on, it'll be fun," he said, his eyes gleaming with excitement. But before we could respond, something caught our attention: a shadow behind the camp. I quickly pointed my phone's torch toward it, but there was nothing there. We exchanged uneasy glances, the laughter dying on our lips. Then came the whispers, faint at first, like a breeze rustling through the trees, but they grew louder, clearer, and more sinister. The words were indecipherable, but the tone was unmistakably menacing. My heart pounded in my chest as I whispered, "We need to leave now." As I took a step forward, I felt something cold and unyielding wrap around my foot. It was as though an invisible hand had grabbed me. My breath hitched, and I screamed. The others rushed toward me, their faces pale with fear. Jacob grabbed my hand and pulled me free, but my heart felt heavy with dread. "Whatever this is," I said shakily, "it won't let us leave." We scanned the forest again, but the silence had returned. It was unnatural, oppressive, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Then we saw a faint red light glowing in the distance. It was small and steady, but it sent shivers down our spines. We huddled back into the tent, hoping the flimsy fabric would somehow shield us from whatever was out there. But the whispers returned, now surrounding us. The footsteps came next, slow and deliberate, crunching the dry leaves outside. The red light began to blink rapidly, as though it was alive. It felt like eyes watching us, and blinking and malevolent. Joe, trying to keep his voice steady, said, "We need to run," but before we could move, a low, guttural laugh echoed from the bushes. The sound was chilling, unlike anything we had ever heard. It wasn't just a laugh, it was mockery, a warning, and a threat all rolled into one. We froze, our fear holding us captive. Jacob, inexplicably determined, said, "Let's go see what it is." I grabbed his arm, my voice trembling as I pleaded, "Are you mad? That's not human." But Jacob was already stepping out, drawn toward the source of the light. We had no choice but to follow him. As we approached the bushes, the whispers grew louder, circling us like an invisible storm. Jacob suddenly stopped, his face drained of color. Without a word, he stumbled back, his legs giving way beneath him. As we tried to lift him, a shadow emerged from the darkness. Its face was disturbingly human, yet its glowing red eyes and the swirling smoke around it made it clear that this was no ordinary being. It advanced slowly, and with every step, the air grew colder, heavier. The whispers intensified, now calling each of us by name. My legs felt rooted to the ground, as if the very earth was holding me in place. Jacob twitched violently, his body cold as ice. When I touched his shoulder, he felt lifeless, his eyes tightly shut. In desperation, I picked up a stick and hurled it at the shadow, but it passed through, hitting nothing. A deep, resonant voice boomed, "You shouldn't have come here. This place is not yours." The words echoed from all directions, as though the forest itself was speaking. The shadow raised its hand, and the ground began to tremble. Our camp suddenly lit up, revealing a second, larger shadow. Its face kept shifting, one moment animalistic, the next human, and then featureless. Jacob's eyes snapped open, but they burned like fire. He smiled a grotesque, unnatural grin and said, "Now everything will stop." His voice was not his own, and it sent a chill down my spine. I shouted to my friends, "Close your eyes and recite verses from the Bible." We began reciting in unison, our voices trembling but resolute. Slowly, Jacob's body returned to normal, and he collapsed, unconscious. We lifted him and ran, the forest seemingly trying to pull us back. The ground beneath us felt alive, resisting our every step. Behind us, a third shadow emerged, larger and more terrifying than the others. Its face was a nightmare, constantly changing and impossible to describe. Finally, we reached the road and flagged down a passing car. The driver, a local man, saw our state and let us in without question. He drove us back to our hotel, where we spent the rest of the night in silence, too shaken to speak. The next morning, we called a priest who assured us that the entity had failed to possess Jacob completely. After blessing us and giving us holy water, he warned us to never return to that place. To this day, the memory of that night haunts us. Jacob has recovered, but the fear lingers. If there's one thing I've learned, it's to respect the unknown. If you enjoyed this story, please share it with your friends, check out my other stories, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel.